Welcome back to Lost Channel. My name is Anton Vieltsin and I'm a criminal defense attorney in the Southern District of California. Today I'm going to share with you an interesting case. This one deals with criminal and immigration law, which are two fields that often go hand in hand. And specifically, we're going to discuss privileges. So if anyone ever told you that there's no benefit to getting married, there's at least one benefit that deals with trials.
How long is this gonna last? I'm ready to hit the Bud Light.
I already took care of it.
Say, well, all right, now we are gathered here today to join in marriage, Bob and Julie. Bob, do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? Do I hear and I do, I do, do I hear and I do?
I do.
Julie, do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? Do I hear and I do, I do, do I hear and I do?
I do.
Going once, going twice, and I'll pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride.
And away we go.
Usually, your spouse cannot testify against you during trial if you're legally married. And there's another privilege that deals with communications during marriage, even if you're later divorced. So let's go ahead and take a look at these privileges in this case. In this video, we'll be discussing United States versus Fomichev, which is a Ninth Circuit case that deals with sham marriage. And specifically, we're going to discuss privileges during trial. So per usual, we're first going to discuss the facts of the case, and then we're going to talk about the law. So here's what happened. Mr. Fomichev was born in Russia. He moved to the United States in 2003 under the student visa. He meets Svetlana Pogosyan in 2006 and they marry. In 2007, he applies for an alien relative visa and they try to adjust Mr. Fomichev's immigration status. In 2009, they file a petition to remove conditions of residence for Mr. Fomichev, and they're certifying that the marriage is not a fake marriage and it is not done for the purpose of immigration, but they're really in love. They also attach joint tax returns to prove that they're together. In 2010, IRS meets with Mrs. Pogosyan at a coffee shop. There she provides conflicting answers about residence. They ask her, where's Mr. Fomichev? And they're not living together, it turns out. Here's something I want to mention here. Deals with Miranda. People often think that whenever law enforcement asks you questions, they have to provide Miranda warnings to you. That is not true. The only time where law enforcement needs to provide those Miranda warnings to you, the right to remain silent and so on, is when you're in custody and being interrogated. This was a voluntary meeting between Mrs. Pogosyan and IRS. So I doubt the agents actually provided her with Miranda rights. But keep that in mind. Whenever you're being interviewed by law enforcement, maybe have an attorney present next to you. And better yet, don't answer any questions without an attorney. But anyways, she provides the answers that are conflicting with what was previously provided in the documents. She decides to come clean. Why? Well, because the agent tells Mrs. Pogosyan that providing false statements to law enforcement is actually violation of federal law and you can be charged for it. So she comes clean and says that this is a fake sham marriage. She then says that she's willing to assist IRS and law enforcement immigration agents as to this marriage. In the next few years, she wears a wire. And at some point she records a conversation between her and Mr. Fomichev, where Mr. Fomichev tells Mrs. Pogosyan, do not set us up, me and you, in regards to immigration, as no one knows and no one can prove anything. Well, in 2012, they divorce. In 2013, Mr. Fomichev is charged in federal court with the following crimes. 3 counts of false income tax returns, 2 counts of false statements to the United States dealing with immigration purpose of marriage, that there was no immigration, there was immigration purpose and not a real marriage, And finally, 2 counts of false statements in immigration documents. Probably those tax returns and additional documents that he certified when he was adjusting his status. Those are the crimes. When he goes to trial, the government uses the recordings to prove that this was a sham marriage and that these tax returns and so on were a sham, they were false. Well, he says in his motion that this recording cannot be used against him. There is a privilege. So let's take a look at the privileges. Now we're into the law. There's 2 types of privileges when it comes to trial dealing with marriage. One is spousal testimonial privilege, and the other one is marital communication privilege. Those are 2 different things. If we're dealing with a spousal testimonial privilege, what does that mean? It prohibits one spouse to testify against another in trial during the course of marriage. When the marriage ends, so does the privilege. This applies only during marriage. So here's an example. 2 people are married and one is accused of a crime. Well, the other one cannot testify against the other one. That's the point. The witnessing spouse is the one that holds the privilege. He or she is the one that can say, I don't want to testify because this is a marriage. I don't want to be against my husband or against my wife. But there's an exception of sham marriage, meaning if there's a fake marriage, this doesn't apply. How does that usually used? The exception applies when the marriage is too close to trial. I gave you 2 examples here and 2 citations. In one case, the marriage happened the eve of the trial. And in another one, it was only 3 days before trial. So clearly we can tell from the time span that these individuals got married just to use the spousal privilege during trial. But the spousal testimonial privilege does not apply necessarily to old communications. So here, in this case, the Court of Appeals reminds us that it's really the marital communication privilege that applies. What is the marital communication privilege? Confidential communications, meaning those between you and your spouse, where nobody else can hear, thus they're being confidential. During a valid marriage, such as this one, this marriage is valid. Yeah, it is a sham marriage, but it is a licensed marriage. Unless the marriage becomes irreconcilable, when the statements are made, those communications cannot be used against you at trial. It does not end when the marriage ends. Unlike your marriage, this privilege lives on. So in this situation, either spouse can invoke the privilege. It ensures that 2 spouses can freely share their deep concerns and issues with their spouse without worrying that the other one will turn on them later on in trial. Privacy is the essential concept behind this privilege. And finally, unlike what the government says, sham exception does not apply in this privilege. So Mr. Fomichov is correct. The statements that he's made in private to his wife, even though that marriage was sham, cannot be used against him later on after he gets divorced in trial. So for those reasons, the Ninth Circuit says that the recordings had to be suppressed, could not be used against him in trial. If you enjoyed this video, and if you now understand how one privilege versus another one works, click like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.